And you have to wonder, you know, where was the failing that these fathers keep having these sons that are total opposites. So the Israelite elders came to Samuel and said, "We want a king. We're done with judges. These sons have been worthless. We want a king." And like all the other nations. So again, if they had cleared out these nations as they should have, they wouldn't have that even as an example for them. But it's kind of one of those, I want what everybody else has. And Samuel is upset and rightly goes to God to pray about this situation of these people now want a king. They don't want a judge. What am I to do? And God says, Samuel Samuel took it personally and said, they're rejecting me by asking for a king. And God says, they're not rejecting you, Samuel. They're rejecting me. They're rejecting God by asking for a king. Um, you know, that wasn't in the plan. He had it set up that they would have these judges and that he was to be their leader, not a king. So he says, give them what they want. He tells Samuel to warn the people about what this is going to mean for them, and that they're making a mistake. But then go ahead and show them the way to get a king. And so Samuel tells them what they're going to get by going down this path. The king will take your sons to be in his military, so they're going to be drafted. The king will have them plow the ground, reap the harvest, and make implements of war. The king will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. So, in essence, their sons and daughters are going to be whatever the king tells them to be. The king will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards. So, they're going to get whatever the remnants are, the leftovers, the bad stuff. The king will take a tenth of your grain and vineyards and give it to his officers and servants. So they're going to work and till the ground and make this harvest available, and then somebody else is going to come in and take it and give it to these officers. And the king will take your servants, young men and donkeys, and put them to work. So in essence, they're going to be slaves. And the king will take a tenth of your flock. So he's taken a tenth of their produce, their grain and vegetables, vineyards. Now he's going to take a tenth of their flocks and their herds and all their livestock. The king will make you his slave. So there that is. And then Israel will cry out, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. So he's going to let them have what they want, and he's going to let them suffer the consequences of of asking for that, and he's going to let them suffer for a while. So again, kind of sad to read that. It's easy for us to look back on that and say, why wouldn't they know better? I wouldn't do that, but we do that all the time. So in chapter 9 of Samuel, Saul is chosen as the first king. So he's a Benjaminite. His father is rich, and Saul is the most handsome guy around. So the Israelites think this is great. His father's wealthy, has great upstanding in the community. This guy is handsome. They've got this handsome king. Yay, them, how lucky they are to have this rich, handsome guy as their king. Saul does show some humility when he's selected and is astonished that he was chosen as a Benjaminite. He says, they're the lowliest of the tribes. Are you sure that I'm the one? And so that at least spoke well of him at the beginning. In chapter 10, he is anointed, and it says, the Spirit of God rushes upon him, and he prophesies right away. And Samuel gathers the Israelites and announces that this king, and he does it by lot. So just like we read in a week or two ago, they brought all the tribes together. They cast lots. They narrow it down to a tribe. By tribe, they narrow it to a clan. By clan, they narrow it to a household. And with household, they finally narrow it down to Saul, and he's revealed as their king. And it was humorous. I found that when they got ready to announce him, um, Saul was hiding. There's your big courageous king. Um, he was. It says he's hiding among the baggage. I'm not sure what the baggage is, but anyway, I found that humorous. That here's their brave king. He's hiding. Um, He's also taller than all the other Israelites. So again, he's got this commanding presence of being tall and handsome and rich. But what does that get you? And Samuel writes up the roles and responsibilities of the king. And it mentions at the end of the chapter that Saul already has some dissenters. It says, some worthless fellows said, how can this man save us? And they despised him and brought him no present, but he held his peace. So he knows he already has people who don't like him, aren't behind him, but he just went on about his business and kept quiet about it. So in chapter 11, Saul has his first battle against the Ammonites, and they have a victory. So again, the people are, yay, everything's going great. We've got peace. We've got this great king. We were victorious in battle. Everything's coming up roses. Chapter 12, Samuel is old, and he has one last chat with the people. He kind of gives them a little summary of history and a little lecture sermon. And then in chapter 13, Saul is very new in his role as king, and he's already messed up. So he was supposed to wait 7 days, and Samuel was going to come and do this sacrifice, this offering that was to be done. And Saul got tired of waiting and decided he would just take matters into his own hands, and he would just do this sacrifice. Well, that's a no-no, because Saul wasn't a Levi. He wasn't able to do that duty. And so God is angry, and he punishes him for it. And his punishment is that the kingship would not last in Saul's family. So he's just out of the gate, and he's already told, you're going to be the one and only. You're not going to pass this on to your sons. When you're done, it's done. And some other family would take over this kingship after his death. And this ends up that it'll be David. We're going to read about that in 2 Samuel chapter 5, probably next week. And so, you think about that, Saul, I don't know, he doesn't know who it's going to be, but this is quite a crushing blow to him to find out that his reign is already going to be so short-lived. In chapter 15, so we skip 14, chapter 15, Saul was to fight the Amalekites, and he wasn't to spare any people or any livestock. And you can see Exodus chapter 17, verses 14 to 16. If you remember, this is the nation that God said, I will wipe them out forever. And it didn't happen then, but we said it was coming, that they would be forever wiped out. And this is it. And so God said, don't leave any of them. And Saul decides he knows better, and is greedy or whatever his reason is. So he keeps some of the livestock. And you can read that in verse 10. And it says in verse 10, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. And Samuel was angry when God told him this, and he cries to the Lord all night. Samuel gets up early the next morning. He goes to see Saul. And Samuel says to him, what is this bleating of sheep in my ears and the lowing of oxen that I hear? So he calls him out on this, that if he didn't take livestock, why is he hearing sheep and oxen? And Saul says, well, we brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord. So he tries to cover it up, that they weren't keeping them for themselves. They were keeping them so that they could come back and make this great sacrifice to God. And Samuel says to Saul, stop. Like, I don't hush, talk to the hand. I'll tell you what the Lord said to me. And he said to him, speak. And so Samuel tells him, you've screwed up. This is not going to be a good thing. And in chapter 16, Samuel is so fed up with him that he stops seeing him. He's not serving as his priest anymore. He just goes away and he's just done with Saul. And um, God tells Samuel to go to the house of Jesse, who is a Benjaminite. And I find it interesting that he keeps going to this tribe of Benjamin, although they're supposed to be the lowliest now. He's pulled these Saul and now David from the Benjaminites, and he's going to show him the next king. And they bring